Organ of hearing. Cochlear duct. The cochlear duct has a central position in the cochlea of the bony labyrinth, dividing it into two canals, the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani. It is maintained in this position by being attached centrally to the lamina of the modiolus, which is a thin lamina of bone extending from the modiolus, the central bony core of the cochlea, and peripherally to the outer wall of the cochlea. Thus, the triangular-shaped cochlear duct has an outer wall against the bony cochlea consisting of thickened, epithelial-lined periosteum, the spiral ligament. A roof, the vestibular membrane, which separates the endolymph in the cochlear duct from the perilymph in the scala vestibuli and consists of a membrane with a connective tissue core lined on either side with epithelium, and a floor, which separates the endolymph in the cochlear duct from the perilymph in the scala tympani and consists of the free edge of the lamina of the modiolus, and a membrane, the basilar membrane, extending from this free edge of the lamina of the modiolus to an extension of the spiral ligament covering the outer wall of the cochlea. The spiral organ is the organ of hearing, rests on the basilar membrane, and projects into the enclosed, endolymph-filled cochlear duct. Vessels. The arterial supply to the internal ear is divided between vessels supplying the bony labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth. The bony labyrinth is supplied by the same arteries that supply the surrounding temporal bone. These include an anterior tympanic branch from the maxillary artery, a stylomastoid branch from the posterior auricular artery, and a petrosal branch from the middle meningeal artery. The membranous labyrinth is supplied by the labyrinthine artery, which either arises from the anteroinferior cerebellar artery or is a direct branch of the basilar artery. Whatever its origin, it enters the internal acoustic meatus with the facial and vestibular cochlear nerves and eventually divides into a cochlear branch, which passes through the modiolus and supplies the cochlear duct, and one or two vestibular branches, which supply the vestibular apparatus. Venous drainage of the membranous labyrinth is through vestibular veins and cochlear veins, which follow the arteries. These come together to form a labyrinthine vein, which eventually empties into either the inferior petrosal sinus or the sigmoid sinus. Innervation. The vestibular cochlear nerve carries special afferent fibers for hearing, the cochlear component, and balance, the vestibular component. It enters the lateral surface of the brainstem, between the pons and medulla, after exiting the temporal bone through the internal acoustic meatus and crossing the posterior cranial fossa. Inside the temporal bone, at the distal end of the internal acoustic meatus, the vestibular cochlear nerve divides to form the cochlear nerve, and the vestibular nerve. The vestibular nerve enlarges to form the vestibular ganglion, before dividing into superior and inferior parts, which distribute to the three semicircular ducts and the utricle and saccule. The cochlear nerve enters the base of the cochlea and passes upward through the modiolus. The ganglion cells of the cochlear nerve are in the spiral ganglion at the base of the lamina of the modiolus as it winds around the modiolus. Branches of the cochlear nerve pass through the lamina of the modiolus to innervate the receptors in the spiral organ.